America does small towns rather well. White picket fences and main street parades. Corner stores where everyone knows your name. Diners serving apple pie since your grandparents were young. Friday night football under the lights. Postcard stuff. But some towns never made it onto postcards. Scattered across these states are places where the bartender goes quiet when you ask the wrong question. Communities where something happened, and the land itself seems to remember. I have gone through state archives and local testimonies to bring you 10 small towns where something is deeply and genuinely wrong. Now, before we dive in, tap that subscribe button. You will not want to miss what is coming next. Let us begin with a town that has accepted its reputation so completely that it now appears in horror documentaries. Centralia, Pennsylvania. Population around 5. Yes, 5 people. This town sits roughly 100 miles northwest of Philadelphia in Columbia County, surrounded by forests and abandoned highways. Drive through in winter, and you might see smoke rising from cracks in the earth. Centralia has been burning underground since 1962. A coal seam fire that was never extinguished now spreads beneath what remains of the town. The fire spread through abandoned mine tunnels beneath Centralia. Carbon monoxide seeped into basements. The ground grew hot enough to melt shoe soles. Sinkholes opened without warning. In 1981, a 12-year-old boy nearly fell into a sinkhole that exposed a pit of fire and toxic gas. He was pulled to safety by his cousin. By 1992, the state condemned all properties. Most residents left. A handful refused. They remain in a town where street addresses no longer exist, and mail service stopped decades ago. Route 61, the main highway, was closed and rerouted. The abandoned section remains, cracked and buckled, with graffiti covering every surface. Steam rises through fissures. The heat beneath your feet is noticeable even in January. Walking through Centralia means walking through a ghost town that is still dying. Homes were demolished. Foundations remain. The few remaining residents live surrounded by empty lots and federal condemnation notices they have ignored for decades. When asked why they stay, one resident simply said that this is home. The fire may outlast them by centuries. Traveling west to Kansas, we find a different kind of emptiness. Something darker in its mystery. Stull is an unincorporated community in Douglas County, roughly 15 miles west of Lawrence. Population sits well below 100. Most people have never heard of Stull. Those interested in dark folklore know it well. For decades, rumors have claimed that Stull is one of the 7 gateways to hell. The legend centers on an abandoned church and cemetery on Emmanuel Hill. The church, built in the 1860s, stood in ruins for years before being demolished in 2002. Some claim the devil himself appears in the cemetery twice a year. Others say a cursed child is buried there. Still others insist a tree in the graveyard serves as a portal. Local historians dismiss these claims. The stories appear to have originated in a 1974 University of Kansas student newspaper article that presented folklore as fact. By the 1980s, hundreds descended on Stull every Halloween, trespassing and vandalizing property. Law enforcement now blocks access on specific dates. The church was demolished to reduce the appeal to thrill seekers. What remains is a small cemetery on a hill in farmland. Families still bury their dead there. The legend persists despite having no foundation in documented history. Stull is simply a rural community that became the target of urban legends that will not die. In Louisiana, we find a town where tragedy is historical and carefully documented. Frenier sits roughly 30 miles west of New Orleans in St. John the Baptist Parish. It does not sit there anymore, actually. Frenier was destroyed after September 29, 1915. On that date, a hurricane devastated communities along Lake Pontchartrain. Frenier was annihilated. At least 50 people died. The train depot, homes, and businesses were obliterated. Survivors did not rebuild. What makes Frenier notable is the legend of Julia Brown. Julia was an elderly woman who reportedly practiced voodoo. She was known for singing, "One day I'm going to die, and I'm going to take the whole town with me." Julia Brown died on September 28, 1915. Her funeral was held the next day. The hurricane struck during her burial. Frenier was destroyed. Locals connected the two events. The legend of the voodoo priestess who cursed the town became Louisiana folklore. Historians note that hurricanes were common and the storm had been tracked for days. The timing was coincidence. The destruction was real. Today, little remains of Frenier. Foundations are visible in the swamp. The area is isolated and overgrown. Visitors report an oppressive atmosphere, though that may simply be the weight of knowing what happened there. Heading north to Montana, we encounter Garnet, a town frozen in time. This ghost town sits roughly 35 miles east of Missoula in Granite County. In the 1890s, Garnet had around 1,000 residents drawn by gold mining. By the 1930s, it was largely abandoned. What makes Garnet different is how well preserved it remains and what is said to happen there. The hotel, saloon, general store, and dozens of homes remain structurally sound, maintained by the Bureau of Land Management. Visitors can walk through the town and peer into windows. Furniture remains. Belongings sit untouched. Reports of paranormal activity are consistent. Visitors describe hearing piano music from the saloon when no one is inside. Lights appear in windows of buildings with no electricity. Footsteps echo on wooden porches. The most frequently reported phenomenon involves the hotel. Guests who have stayed overnight describe being woken by the sound of a woman crying. The sound moves through hallways. When investigated, no source is found. Staff members acknowledge that strange occurrences are mentioned often enough that they are no longer surprised. Traveling to Missouri, we find a neighborhood that has never fully recovered. In April 2001, the decapitated body of a young girl was found near Kansas City's Hibbs Park. The child could not be identified. She became known as Precious Doe. For years, investigators worked to learn who she was. In 2005, she was identified as Erica Michelle Marie Green, age 3. Her mother and stepfather were arrested. The stepfather was convicted of second-degree murder. Erica had been abused for months before her death. The neighborhood has struggled with the weight of her story. Memorials appear and disappear. The park where her body was discovered is used less frequently than other parks nearby. Parents keep their children away. The case is closed legally, but emotionally, the community has not moved past it. Precious Doe represents a haunting by guilt and grief that a child suffered and died in plain sight. In West Virginia, Thurmond offers a different kind of desolation. This town once thrived as a coal and rail hub. At its peak, the population exceeded 500. Today, the population is 5. Thurmond sits along the New River. The train depot still operates for the scenic railway. The town itself is frozen. Buildings remain but are empty. What strikes visitors is the silence. Thurmond was once so busy that trains ran constantly. Money flowed through saloons and hotels. Then the coal industry declined. People left. Those who remained grew old. No children have been born in Thurmond in decades. Walking through the town feels like walking through a stage set. Everything looks real, but nothing functions. The handful of residents who remain do so out of stubbornness. They live in a town that has no future because its industry is gone. When asked why they stay, responses are simple. This is home. Heading west to Nevada, we find Rhyolite. This ghost town sits near Death Valley, roughly 120 miles northwest of Las Vegas. Rhyolite boomed in 1905 when gold was discovered. Within 2 years, the population reached over 5,000. Banks, schools, an opera house, and even a stock exchange were built. By 1920, Rhyolite was abandoned. Today, Rhyolite is one of the most photographed ghost towns in America. The three-story bank building still stands. The old jail is a concrete shell. What makes Rhyolite unsettling is the bottle house, built entirely from glass bottles. Tom Kelly constructed it in 1906 using around 50,000 bottles. The house still stands. The bottles glow in the desert sun. Rhyolite represents the American boom and bust cycle in its purest form. Fortunes were made and lost in less than 2 decades. What remains is beautiful in the way ruins are beautiful, but it is a beauty built on failure. In Alaska, Portlock sits abandoned on the Kenai Peninsula. This was a cannery town established in the 1920s. By the late 1940s, everyone had left. The official explanation involves economic decline. But local stories suggest something different. Residents reportedly left because of unexplained deaths and disappearances. Loggers vanished. Bodies were found mutilated. Boats disappeared. Survivors described being stalked by something large. The Alutiiq people have legends of the Nantinak, a creature similar to Bigfoot. Whether the deaths were caused by bears, human violence, or something else is unknown. What is documented is that Portlock was abandoned rapidly. Buildings were left intact. No one returned. Today, Portlock is accessible only by boat or plane. The structures are collapsing. The forest is reclaiming the town. Visitors describe an oppressive feeling of being watched. What is certain is that Portlock died for reasons people still do not fully discuss. Moving to Illinois, Cairo presents urban decay on a scale that feels apocalyptic. This town sits where the Ohio River meets the Mississippi. In the early 1900s, Cairo had over 15,000 residents. Today, the population is around 700 and falling. Cairo's decline is rooted in economic collapse and racial violence. The town experienced severe racial tensions in the 1960s. White flight followed. Businesses closed. By the 1980s, entire blocks were abandoned. What remains is a town where more buildings are empty than occupied. Mansions built during Cairo's prosperous years stand gutted. The Gem Theater is a ruin. Walking through Cairo is profoundly sad. This was a town with architecture that suggested permanence. That permanence was an illusion. The people left. The buildings remain as monuments to failure. Our final stop is Bodie, California. This is perhaps the most famous and most photographed ghost town in America. Bodie sits in the Sierra Nevada, roughly 75 miles southeast of Lake Tahoe. In 1880, Bodie had nearly 10,000 residents. Gold mining drove the boom. The town had a reputation for violence, with murders occurring almost daily. By the 1940s, Bodie was abandoned. What remains is extraordinary. Bodie is preserved in arrested decay by California state parks. Over 100 buildings stand. Interiors are maintained exactly as they were left. Furniture, dishes, and personal belongings remain untouched. You can look through windows and see tables set for meals that were never eaten. But Bodie also carries weight. The violence, the deaths, the desperation that drove people to this remote location, all of it lingers. Visitors consistently report feeling watched. Park rangers acknowledge that strange things happen regularly enough that they no longer question them. Bodie is beautiful and haunted in equal measure. So there you have it. 10 places across America where something is deeply wrong. Some attract curiosity seekers. Unexplained phenomena, documented hauntings, the atmospheric weight of violent history. Others should make us reflect. Communities destroyed by industrial negligence. Towns abandoned because survival became too hard. Places that carry the scars of racial violence and economic collapse. America's landscape holds all of this. The white picket fences and the mass graves. The apple pie diners and the contaminated soil. The picture postcards and the historical records that document things too unsettling for tourism brochures. These places exist whether we visit them or not. Understanding them is part of understanding where we live. The land remembers what we prefer to forget. If you have visited any of these places or know of similar locations, I want to hear from you. Tell me what I got right. Tell me what I missed. Tell me about the towns in your state where locals speak carefully, where certain questions produce silence, where the past refuses to stay buried. These stories matter. The places are real. The history is documented. Please watch the video appearing on your screen next. And do not forget to subscribe.